Hello, welcome back to my channel, Keen Reads. My name is Jared. It's been a couple weeks since I've made a video, but I'm back. And today I have a stack of some of my favorite books, and I'm just going to be reading you some of the passages that I have really liked from them, passages that I've highlighted, have gone back to, things that have meant a lot to me, or I just really like the flow of the words. They'll all be prose works today. I might make a separate video depending on how this video does with my favorite poetry, specifically some lines or stanzas from poetry, not whole poems. Although I've been thinking about maybe just making a video of me reading some of my favorite poems. We'll see if that happens. One other thing I wanted to mention is that a lot of these, like I said, are special, or I like just because of maybe the flowing of the words or how they sound to my ears. Well, a couple of them are like that. So I don't think I'm going to actually do a lot of elaboration on them. I might just give you the gist of what the book's about and maybe a little bit of my thoughts on them. But some of them I may not really say much for, just because I think words can mean things to different people. So maybe me describing it wouldn't be super useful to you, and I'd rather you come to the text or the quote with your own interpretation, or let it settle in and just see how it affects you. We're going to start with just the first book on my stack, which is Atonement by Ian McEwan. I talked about this in one of my recent videos of books that shaped me as a reader. This is kind of a tale about... it has some twists in it, so I don't want to give you too much about it. But it's about some sisters and some kind of romance things that happens, and a lot of it has to do with guilt and unreliable narrators, things like that. But as you can see, this is one of my favorite books. It was actually my favorite book for a long time. I had a lot of passages to choose from. I just picked the one that I think about. So whenever I think out this book, this is actually the passage that I think about. So let's go. Was everyone else really as alive as she was? For example, did her sister really matter to herself? Was she as valuable to herself as Bryony was? Bryony is the name of the little girl. Was being Cecilia just as vivid an affair as being Bryony? Did her sister also have a real self concealed behind a breaking wave, and did she spend time thinking about it with a finger held up to her face? Did everybody, including her father, Betty, Hardman? If the answer was yes, then the social world, was unbearably complicated with 2 billion voices, and everyone's thoughts striving in equal importance, and everyone's claim on life as intense, and everyone thinking they were unique, when no one was. One could drown in the irrelevance. I think it's pretty obvious. My takeaway from this was the first time I had really kind of... I read this just after finishing high school, and this quote kind of struck me because it was the first time I really think I took it to heart that other people are just as real as myself. And as important as I am to myself, everyone else is as important to themselves. And that kind of struck me and stayed with me. This same idea is kind of similar to what David Foster Wallace said in his... he gave a commencement speech called This Is Water. It's now a pretty famous speech. I think it was for Oberlin College. No, it was someplace in Columbus, Ohio, I think. But a very similar idea to what he expresses in This Is Water speech, which you can look up on YouTube, or you can just read it online. I'm pretty sure there's a manuscript. Next, we have All the Pretty Horses, which is a Western novel by Cormac McCarthy. The quote that I'm going to be reading is one of his most famous quotes. I'm sure you've heard it before, but... Scars have the strange power to remind us that our past is real. The events that cause them can never be forgotten, can they? And I think that's a pretty straightforward passage. I'm not going to elaborate too much on it, but it's, again, a lot of these passages are the passages that come to mind when I think of these books. So it's kind of funny. One of my reasons for reading is the language itself and the ideas that just the words themselves outside of context can kind of stay with me. So I can tell you very little about this plot other than it's a trilogy. Sorry, I just ate dinner. Other than it's a trilogy and it's a Western. But the one thing that I really remember from this book is that quote. I think it's kind of interesting that you can kind of see where my priorities or where literature kind of affects my heart. Next, we have The Things They Carried by Tim O'Brien. This is kind of a short story collection / like short story cycle about the Vietnam War. And again, one of my favorite passages. Also, these are just 10 books that I randomly took off my shelves, really, or 10 books that when I think of a quote that I really like, these are the ones that come to mind. I could probably make a whole nother video of just 10 other books that I like, or 10 other books with quotes that I like. This is just a sampling. Like, now that I'm thinking about it, I didn't pick any Gabriel Garcia Marquez books, he's one of my favorite authors. But anyways, here's a quote from The Things They Carried. Freshly, as if for the first time, you love what's best in yourself and in the world, all that might be lost. At the hour of dusk, you sit at your foxhole and look out on a wide river turning pinkish red, and at the mountains beyond. And although in the morning you must cross the river and go into the mountains and do terrible things and maybe die, even so, you find yourself studying the fine colors on the river. You feel wonder and awe at the setting of the sun, and you are filled with a hard, aching love for how the world could be and always should be, but now is not. I'm going to say this a lot, but I just really love that passage. I think it kind of sums up war in general and the feeling that it must be like to be sitting in a foxhole and know the things that you have to do and the things that may happen or the things that may not happen, but that uncertainty that's associated with it. Kind of a sobering passage. Next book we have is The Call of the Wild by Jack London. This is... I haven't talked about this book on this channel before, but this book holds a special place in my heart because it was really the only book that my dad would read to me other than the Bible when I was growing up. So it was kind of a special book because my dad read it to me. I've reread it a lot, and I didn't actually highlight the points that I wanted to talk about. So let's see if I can find it real quick. Here we go. So obviously this book's about dogs, sled dogs, going through the Arctic Circle. I don't know, just sled dogs and kind of power dynamics that goes into being like the alpha dog and things like that. But this is just, well, I'll just read it to you. There is an ecstasy that marks the summit of life and beyond which life cannot rise. And such is the paradox of living. This ecstasy comes when one is most alive, and it comes as a complete forgetfulness that one is alive. This ecstasy, this forgetfulness of living, comes to the artist, caught up and out of himself in a sheet of flame. It comes to the soldier, war-mad on a stricken field and refusing quarter. And it came to Buck. Buck is the dog. Leading the pack, sounding the old wolf cry, straining after the food that was alive and that fled swiftly before him through the moonlight. He was sounding the deeps of his nature, and of the parts of his nature that were deeper than he, going back into the womb of time. He was mastered by the sheer surging of life, the tidal wave of being, the perfect joy of each separate muscle, joint, and sinew, in that it was everything that was not death, that it was aglow and rampant, expressing itself in movement, flying exultantly under the stars and over the face of dead matter that did not move. Just reading that puts a smile on my face. Yeah. What should we do next? Let's do Blood Meridian because we already talked about Cormac McCarthy, but this is another Western. I know a little bit more about this plot because it's a very famous book and it has some things that really stand out. But the passage I'm going to read, again, this is a passage that just comes to my mind whenever I think of this book. Actually, there's two passages. Let's see if I can find them. I should have done this beforehand. Here we go. Here's one of them. This is just a beautiful description. He rose and turned towards the lights of the town. The tide pools, bright as smelter pots, among the dark rocks where the phosphorescent sea crabs clambered down. Passing through the salt grass, he looked back. The horse had not moved. A ship's light winked in the swells. The colt stood against the horse with its head down and the horse watching. Out there past men's knowing, where the stars are drowning and whales ferry their vast souls through the black and seamless sea. The part about the whales ferrying their vast souls is usually what comes to mind when I think of this book, actually. And then there's one about an asteroid shower, or like a meteor shower. But let me see if I can find it real quick. If not, we'll just move on to the next book. Or, yeah, the next book. Yeah, I can't find it. It's probably like the most popular phrase from this book. So if you just Google quotes from Blood Meridian, you'll find it. Yeah, I can't find it. Oh, here it is. Just kidding. It's the second passage of the book. Night of your birth, 33, the Leonids they were called. God, how the stars did fall. I looked for blackness, holes in the heavens, the dipper stove. Just, Cormac has a real way with words in his descriptions. Anna Karenina, which, one of my favorite books. My favorite book, the year that I read it. I think I read it in 2023. But again, picking from a plethora of passages. But here's one that, when I was just flipping through, is the one that kind of stood out to me. What he felt for this small being was not at all what he had expected. There was nothing happy or joyful in this feeling. On the contrary, there was a new tormenting fear. There was an awareness of a new region of vulnerability. And this awareness was so tormenting at first. The fear lest this helpless being should suffer was so strong that because of it, he scarcely noticed the strange feeling of senseless joy and even pride he had experienced when the baby sneezed. One of the things that I really love in literature, and you'll kind of get that from this passage as well as the passage from The Things They Carried about war, is that I really love when a book puts into words something that I've experienced, but I've never even thought about, or something, not that I've experienced, I've never been to war, but puts into experience something almost universal that I've never really thought about into words. And I can think, wow, I can definitely see that. Sorry. Again, I just ate. Next, we will do Stoner by John Williams. This is a book about a Midwesterner. I think he's a Midwesterner. Kind of a farmer boy who goes to university and ends up being in academia. If you want a really good review of this, Christopher Diaz just recently posted a video reviewing this. I can link it in the comments. But this book has a very special quote to me. I actually know it by heart. But in his 43rd year, William Stoner learned what others much younger had learned before him. That the person one loves at first is not the person one loves at last. And that love is not an end, but a process through which one person attempts to know another. And that's really special to me just because I kind of took it and switched it around a little bit and used it when I proposed to my wife. Next we have Let the Great World Spin by Colum McCann. And there's one passage that usually sticks out to me. Actually, there's kind of two. I'll read a couple of them. So these are shorter. They're kind of pithy sayings, or not pithy, they're sentences or two. The simple things come back to us. They rest for a moment by our rib cages, then suddenly reach in and twist our hearts a notch backwards. When I was walking back out the courtyard to the pen, I felt like someone came and carved my heart out, then put it walking in front of me. That's what I thought. There's my heart going right out in front of me, all on its own, slick with blood. And then the title quote, here it is. The world spins, we stumble on, it is enough. Next we have 9 Stories by J.D. Salinger. J.D. Salinger is my favorite author. It's close between him and Gabriel Garcia Marquez. But it's sayings like what I found in this book that really push him ahead. I think Gabriel Garcia Marquez, every word is a painting, and it feels like it's put there to maximize beauty. But J.D. Salinger just has a way with words. Written in ink, in German, in a small, hopelessly sincere handwriting were the words, "Dear God, life is hell." Nothing led up to or away from it. Alone on the page, and in the sickly stillness of the room, the words appeared to have the stature of an uncontestable, even classic indictment. X, who's the stand-in name for the character, stared at the page for several minutes, trying against heavy odds not to be taken in. Then, with far more zeal than he had done anything in weeks, he picked up a pencil stub and wrote down under the inscription in English, "Fathers and teachers, I ponder, what is hell? I maintain that it is suffering, that it is the suffering of being unable to love." So I've loved this passage for a long time. It's from the short story From Esme with Love and Squalor. And recently, I was reading some history of philosophy or some history of thought or something like that. And they actually referred to an ancient or like a medieval, or I'm butchering this, but it sounds like this hell being the suffering of being unable to love is something that was expressed by like a medieval philosopher or someone like that. So it is not originally with J.D. Salinger, which I just figured out recently. But I still like the way that he works it into the story. The other passage is from Day DeMeyers Smith's Blue Period, and the fact is always obvious much too late, but the most singular difference between happiness and joy is that happiness is a solid and joy a liquid. Mine started to seep through its container as early as the next morning. I think there's a lot of truth to that, in that joy being a liquid, in that it kind of infects those around us. And being happy, I think of as more of a momentary feeling, whereas joy is something deeper that kind of infects our being. But that's just my thoughts on it. Last but not least, we have Swan's Way, part 1 of In Search of Lost Time, or Remembrance of Things Past, depending on your translation, by Marcel Proust. And goodness, I should have looked beforehand of what passage I wanted to read, because I did a lot in here. So bear with me. Here's one. He was one of that class of men who, apart from a scientific career in which they may well have proved brilliantly successful, have acquired an entirely different kind of culture, literary or artistic, for which their professional specialization has no use, but by which their conversation profits. That's something I relate to a lot, being a pharmacist. Reading and literature has nothing to do with what I spend the majority of my time doing, but it occupies the majority of my mind. And I do talk about pharmacy a lot because people are always curious about what I do as a pharmacist that works not in a pharmacy. I work on the floor of a hospital, specifically the leukemia wing of my hospital. So I very rarely touch any medications or things like that. But all that to say, I do talk about pharmacy a lot because people are curious what I do. But most of the time I try to steer the conversation to literature. So that's just something that I related to. There's a lot of other good passages in this book, but just for the sake of time of this video, I'm just going to tell you to read it. And that's the 10 books that I picked out. Again, if you guys like this video, I can do some more. And I also, now that as I was picking out these books, I realized this would be a good video to do with poetry, either just reading some poems, because I always like I like reading poems out loud, and I think hearing poems makes them a lot more resonant. Or I'll just read some passages from some poems. But I really hope you enjoyed this video. Please comment some of your favorite quotes from books, or just books that you think I should read to experience similar language or things that I pointed out. And let me know if you would like to see that poetry video. If you made it this far, thank you for watching, and I will see you next time.